Colleen Ritzer was a 9th grade maths teacher at Danvers High School, Massachusetts, but on one day in October of 2013, she went missing at the end of the school day, and she would later be found brutally murdered in the woods at the hands of one of her very own students. Today we're going to be talking about the heartbreaking case of Colleen Ritzer and her killer student, Philip Chisholm. This series is made for educational purposes. Viewer discretion is advised. Colleen Ritzer was born on May 13, 1989 in Andover, Massachusetts to her parents Tom and Peggy Ritzer. She also had a brother who was also named Tom and a younger sister named Laura. Colleen was loved deeply by her family. She was known as a very positive and happy person. She attended Andover High School, where she was a member of the National Honor Society and was also a cheerleader. She then went to Assumption College and went on to study psychology and maths, so she was pretty smart. Colleen had two main passions in her life, one being her family and the other was for teaching. She had always had an interest in teaching from a young age. Growing up, she always was inspired by her teachers that had taught her to follow her dreams. Over her teaching career, she had worked at multiple different schools. She was a student teacher at Hale Middle School before becoming a long-term substitute teacher at Gloucester High School. In 2012, when she was aged 23, she began her first long-term permanent teaching job at Danvers High School, which is obviously in Danvers, Massachusetts. And to my knowledge, she was still continuing her further studies at this time. At Danvers High School, she would teach geometry and algebra to children in the 9th grade. And everyone liked Colleen, the staff and students alike. It was very obvious that Colleen had a strong passion and care for her job and helping her students. Colleen had a Twitter account that she would use to interact with her students, sending them motivational quotes and videos to help push them to their full potential. She also lived by one specific quote which said, "Every day may not be good, but there is something good in every day," which is just a positive way to look at things, I guess. Colleen would also often host after-school study sessions for her students, so that any students who were struggling would be able to catch up and get some extra help. Alongside being an incredibly caring teacher, Colleen was a huge family person. She was incredibly loving and extremely joyful. She would walk into a room and you'd know about it. Some of her hobbies included shopping, she loved movies, baking, obviously spending time with her friends and family, as well as travelling. She also loved listening to country music and her favourite colour was pink, hence why I'm wearing a pink shirt and we're going for a pink vibe here today. It's said that Peggy and Thomas were often complimented on how well that they had parented their children, as they were all so kind and polite. On Tuesday the 22nd of October 2013, Colleen had been working her usual shift at Danvers High School, and she was hosting one of these after-school study sessions to help the students that were struggling. And at this particular study session, there were only two students present, one being 14-year-old Philip Chisholm. Philip had been present at school earlier in the day when Colleen had come over to him and asked him to stay behind to study for an upcoming test. As I said before, there were two students in this study group, and at about 3 p.m, Colleen exits her classroom and walks down the corridor to go to the bathroom. Fast forwarding to 6:30 p.m, 14-year-old Philip Chisholm is yet to arrive home, and his mother Diana is beginning to worry about him. So she went to the school to look for him, and when she couldn't find him, she reported him missing to the police. After school, Philip usually had football/soccer practice, so his team were questioned, and then they said they did see Philip earlier in that day, but he had missed their team practice at 4 p.m. and a 6 p.m. team dinner, which they thought was strange. The last they had seen of him was him running away from the football pitch, telling them that he had something important to take care of. After learning that Philip Chisholm went missing, The Danvers High School principal sent out an email to all staff members informing them of his disappearance. This is also when the principal receives a phone call from another maths teacher named Sarah, informing her that Philip Chisholm wasn't the only missing person, and that Colleen was missing too. At this time, Colleen was still living with her parents, and she usually came home straight after work. But her parents knew that something was wrong because not only had she not returned home, but she wasn't answering any of their phone calls or texts, which was very out of character for her. She was usually quite responsible. All concerned, her father Tom decided to drive to Danvers High School to go and check on her. But when he got there, he notices that Colleen's car was still parked outside. He then gets in contact with the other maths teacher, Sarah, who then contacts the principal to inform her that Colleen is also missing. So we're just going to talk a bit about Philip Chisholm now. So he was born on January 12th, 1999, which meant he was 14 years old at the time of today's case. He was originally from Tennessee and had recently moved to Danvers, Massachusetts, so he wasn't overly familiar with the area. His mother was going through quite a nasty divorce, however, he wasn't showing any antisocial behaviours. He was quite quiet and awkward and shy, and he did have difficulties making friends at school. But he did not seem to have any real behavioural issues going on. But now him and his teacher are both missing, and the last sighting of them was at this after-school tutoring session. The other student that was in this session came forward saying that Colleen had brought up Philip's move from Tennessee to him and began asking him about it. And when she did bring this up, Philip began to grow very upset, so she tries to change the topic of conversation, but it's clear that he was still very upset and was just sat talking to himself. So the study session had ended, and it was weird that both Colleen and Philip were not at home and were missing. No one should have still been left at the school. Other teachers began searching around the school and in Colleen's classroom for the pair, but all of her belongings were gone from the classroom, but her car was still outside, meaning she must have still been at school. At this point, it had been hours since Colleen was due to return home, and so at 11:20 p.m, her parents reported her missing to the police. Her phone was tracked, and a ping of her location showed her last location as being near Halton Richmond Middle School, which was about 24 minutes away from Danvers High School. They then also requested a ping of Philip Chisholm's phone, and this showed that his last known location was at the Hollywood Hits Premier Movie Theatre, but when police went down there, he was nowhere to be seen. At this point, a search for Colleen and Philip at the school is well underway. And on October 23rd at 12:30 a.m, the Topsfield Police Department received reports that a young man was seen walking the wrong way down the highway on Salem Road. So police officers were dispatched because obviously you can't walk down the highway. And when the police officers arrived, they instantly recognised this boy to be 14-year-old Philip Chisholm. Of course, they were happy that they'd found this missing child safe and sound, but what was weird was that he was found wearing a ski mask. Now, they didn't think anything of this because it was cold outside at the time. But what made this strange was that when he was questioned, he told them that he was coming from Tennessee and that he was going nowhere. Now, after doing a full inspection of Philip Chisholm, the officers found that his hands were covered in bloodstains, so they instantly searched him. And what they found was a rock and a credit card belonging to a woman, and I'm sure you can guess whose credit card this was. Yes, it was Colleen's. Now, this didn't ring any alarm bells to these officers because they hadn't been informed of Colleen's disappearance. They also asked him if he had any weapons on him or any sharp objects that would hurt them, and that's when he tells them that his backpack is full of survival gear. But in this bag there was a pair of underwear, several bank cards, a driving licence and a bloody box cutter. Now, as you can guess, all of these bank cards and this driving licence did belong to Colleen. And when asked where he got them, he made up an excuse which he then backtracked and changed to he just found them in a car. And when the police asked him where the blood had come from, he just replied with, "the girl." He then informed them that she was buried in the woods, so they took him straight to the Danvers police station, and that's when his mother is called. Being a minor, he would need his mother to be in the room to speak to police, but he decided that he wanted to speak to them without his mother being present. Now, back at the school, the bathroom which Colleen had left the study session to go and use had been searched, and it had a strong smell of disinfectant. In a cubicle, there were some brownish red stains, and in one of them it seemed to be like there was a handprint. Further drops of blood were also found near the main entrance of the school. At 3 a.m, when Philip Chisholm was being held in police custody, Colleen's friends and family were out searching for her, including another maths teacher named Todd Butterworth. It was him who found some more evidence. He found her backpack wedged in between some rocks near the school. He also found a pair of blood-stained white gloves and some leaves covered in blood. He called the police, and when they arrived, an officer saw something poking out from underneath the leaves. It was a human toe covered in pink nail polish. This body was that of a woman, and she was posed in a sexually suggestive position. She was naked from the waist down, her top was pulled up and her bra was pulled down, exposing her breasts. She also had been stabbed multiple times, her throat had been slit, and even more disturbingly, a tree branch had been found inserted inside of her. Near the body, they found some socks, gloves, paper, and a backpack containing Philip Chisholm's ID. Many of these items were covered in blood, and one piece of paper was neatly folded near the body, and when it was opened, it revealed a note saying, "I hate you all." This body was identified to be that of Colleen Ritzer. The cause of death was found to be asphyxiation and 16 stab wounds which had hit major blood vessels, causing her to bleed out. Now, if it isn't clear as day, but Philip Chisholm was involved, they just needed to understand what had happened. Fortunately for police, Danvers High School had recently installed new CCTV cameras all over the school campus, so pretty much everything was caught on camera. Which is great news, because in a lot of other cases you hear that either they don't have security cameras or they aren't working, so it's super nice to hear that for once the cameras are working. What was found was truly shocking and extremely disturbing. So, I'm just going to give you a brief rundown of this day. So, on the morning of October 22nd, 2013, Philip Chisholm arrives at school with multiple bags which he stores in his locker, and these bags later were found containing the box cutter, ski mask, and multiple different outfits. At 2:54 p.m, Colleen can be seen on CCTV footage walking out of her classroom and down the corridor heading towards the women's toilets on the second floor. Then at 2:55 p.m, so only a minute later, Philip Chisholm can be seen loitering outside the classroom wearing a blue hoodie. He then pulls up his hood and begins to follow Colleen to the women's bathrooms. He then puts on a pair of white gloves and enters the bathroom. Then at 3:06 p.m, so 11 minutes later, a female student walks into the bathroom but then instantly turns around and leaves. Then at 3:07 p.m, Philip leaves the bathroom with his hood up, carrying some black fabric, and his hand is covered in blood. This student who entered the bathroom was later questioned by police and said that she'd seen a pile of clothes on the floor and that someone's naked, but so she just assumed that someone was getting changed, so she just decided to leave. However, in that bathroom, Philip Chisholm has attacked Colleen from behind, strangling her, stabbing her 16 times with the box cutter, and then he raped her again. He is then seen on multiple cameras running out of the building and then returning, but this time he has just on a white t-shirt, whereas he had a blue hoodie on before. As he comes back into the building, he runs past a teacher who seemed to tell him off for running. He then re-enters Colleen's classroom, collects her belongings, and then is seen leaving the building before returning empty-handed. This time he had on a red sweatshirt and was wearing a ski mask. And another student is then seen trying to talk to him, but he just kind of ignores him and runs past. He then exits the building once again, and then at 3:14 p.m. he comes back with a wheelie bin, which he pulls down the corridor and up to the women's bathroom on the second floor. At 3:23 p.m. he is seen leaving the building once again, but this time the wheelie bin seems to be a lot heavier than it did before, and he's dragging it towards a wooded area behind the school, and he has the ski mask on this entire time. He then placed Colleen's body in the woods and then proceeded to sexually assault her with the tree branch and stage the crime scene. Then at 3:30 p.m. he is seen running away from the school by another student's mother. Then half an hour later at 4 p.m. he re-enters the school. This time he's barefoot and his jeans are covered in blood. He then goes into another bathroom and changes once again, and this time it's into his football gear. He then goes back to the second floor bathroom and leaves a minute later and exits the building for the final time. At 4:30 p.m. he goes to a Wendy's restaurant and buys a burger using Colleen's credit card before heading to the Hollywood Hits movie theatre and watches a movie called Blue Jasmine. And near this movie theatre, police later found both Colleen and Philip's mobile phones smashed on the ground. And then finally at 6:34 p.m. his mother reported him missing to the police. So now that I've run you through the timeline, we're going to talk about the arrest. So Philip Chisholm was arrested and charged with murder, aggravated rape and armed robbery. In November of 2015, his trial began, which he pled not guilty by the reason of insanity. And after a mental competency hearing took place, it was decided that he would be tried as an adult. And during his trial, Philip Chisholm barely spoke at all, which is just odd and creepy. Now I'm going to backtrack to June 2nd, 2014, which is a time he was awaiting his trial, and he was at the Metro Youth Services facility in Boston. And he had attacked a female youth worker as she was leaving her bathroom. He walked up behind her before kicking off his sandals to make a noise. He then approached her with a pencil before putting both his hands around her neck and begins to choke her. She did manage to remove one of his hands from her neck, and so he punched her in the face, head and the jaw. At this point she was able to scream for help. Other staff members came to her rescue and were able to restrain him. He was additionally charged with assault and battery with a dangerous weapon, i.e. the pencil, which he attempted to stab her with. The judge decided to send him for a mental health evaluation in a state hospital due to the violent outburst that he was having. During this stay at the hospital, he was diagnosed with something. I'm not too sure what he was diagnosed with, but he was treated and medicated for this. The youth worker that he had attacked sustained bruises to her face, head and jaw, as well as a scratch down her back where her t-shirt had been cut with the pencil. Now, going back to the trial for Colleen's murder, the defence didn't try to argue whether or not he had killed her, because it was pretty obvious that he had. But they tried to blame Colleen for a word she had used that had triggered him into killing her and brought on a psychotic episode. And according to the defence, this word was Tennessee. They said that he struggled with the move from Tennessee and that he had struggled to adjust to his new life, having to socialise and make new friends, and that his home life was full of abuse at the hands of his father. It was unstable and unpredictable, and then on top of that, he had the effects of the divorce. He was upset because his mother had just ripped him and his siblings from their lives in Tennessee and moved to Danvers, and that Philip was incredibly against this move. A psychologist also testified that it was likely that Philip had early onset schizophrenia, but the prosecution didn't really agree with any of this, which I wouldn't. And the prosecution came at him hard, which many people seem to have a problem with, but they said that he was calculated and evil. He murdered a teacher who was only trying her best to support him, and that he had planned this up by setting up a murder kit at school, and that he had violent tendencies prior to the murder. They also accused him of torturing and lighting cats on fire when he lived in Tennessee. Now, I'm not sure whether they have any evidence of this, or I'm not too sure, but there's that. During the trial, there were also lots of battles between mental health professionals as to whether he was mentally stable or not. The prosecution argued that he was, the defense argued that he wasn't. Yes, he was disturbed, but was his ability to distinguish right and wrong affected? And I mean, it's pretty obvious that this murder was premeditated. I mean, he literally brought a murder kit to school, and I think he used the word Tennessee as an excuse to murder her. Even more insanely, the defense wanted the sexual assault charges against him to be dropped because they said that she was dead and that it just didn't matter. What? What do you mean? Like, just because someone's dead doesn't mean it doesn't matter. The prosecution painted for the jury a very gruesome picture of what had taken place. Colleen had been strangled, stabbed, and assaulted. She was abandoned in the woods after being posed in a sexually suggestive way. And that how this was such an awful thing for Colleen and her family to experience. The CCTV, it never shows Philip attempting to clean up the bathroom where he murdered Colleen, which you'd think there would be lots of blood, right? Well, unfortunately, a school cleaner had come across the crime scene and attempted to report what he had found to a custodian, which is good. But the custodian that he had reported to didn't understand what he was saying because his English wasn't the best. He said, "I found blood in the women's bathroom in the second floor." But apparently the custodian heard the word blue, not blood, I'm not sure, and had assumed that a blue chemical had been spilled and not blood, so had told the cleaners to go ahead and clean it up. So this crucial evidence was being destroyed, and that's super frustrating because, I mean, this cleaner even described it looking like a slaughterhouse, which that must have been a lot of blood to describe it as a slaughterhouse. Later on, a diamond earring was found in bloody floor cleaner that this cleaner had used to scrub the floors. Like, hello, what the fuck? That's not suspicious or what? I don't know what is. On February 26, 2016, Philip Chisholm was found guilty of first-degree murder with deliberate premeditation and extreme atrocity or cruelty, but was found not guilty of aggravated rape, which is so frustrating. Hello guys, so I'm just in editing now and I've realised that I didn't explain it very well. So initially he was charged with 2 counts of rape, not 1, and he was found guilty of 1 of these, with the other count being for after Colleen was dead. So it's still frustrating that he was found not guilty of 1 count, but it's good that he was charged with 1, if that makes sense. He was also found guilty of armed robbery for stealing Colleen's credit cards. So Philip was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years, plus two 40-year sentences for the robbery charge to be served concurrently. He was also ordered to undergo psychiatric treatment in prison, which I think is for the best. Now, Colleen's friends and family were not happy with this short sentence, so I'm going to read you a statement that they put. They said, "We are devastated and feel betrayed with Judge Lowy's inability to give 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole to the individual that took Colleen's life in such a horrific manner. We are disgusted and personally offended with the defense's repulsive recommendation that Colleen's killer be parole eligible within 15 years, therefore putting him back into society at the age of 29 to kill again. The defense's legal maneuvering is despicable and demonstrates utmost disrespect to our daughter and sister Colleen's life. Evil cannot be rehabilitated." Colleen's funeral was held on October 28, 2013, and she was laid to rest in the Spring Grove Cemetery in her hometown of Andover. Following Colleen's tragic murder, her family set up the Colleen Ritzer Memorial Fund, which offers grants and funds for scholarships for aspiring teachers, and I'll leave that link down below so you can read more about it. So that's the end of this episode. I would love to hear your thoughts and feelings down below in the comments. If you enjoyed, give it a like and a subscribe, or on Spotify give it a 5-star rating. I would really appreciate it. And I'll see you very soon with a brand new episode. Bye!